Well, hello and welcome to the Creating Connections podcast, where I bring voices and perspectives from people who are making a difference for children's learning and development. I'm Rachel Stewart, and I'm passionate about connecting with people to share experiences and learn from each other how we can best support children to thrive. In this series of the podcast, we're exploring successful leaders in education, so you can learn from a diverse range of people what makes a successful leader and how you can take their learnings and apply them to your leadership. Today, I'm introducing you to Deborah Patterson, who is an experienced leader with a career in education spanning over 46 years, 22 of which she's spent as a school principal in the government primary sector. Her experience extends to leadership, coaching, facilitation, and keynote speaking, also working as a mentor, assessor, teacher, and now an author. Deb's book, Passion, Guts and Leadership, encourages leaders with an A to Z of being an unconventional leader. In this episode, I'll explore Deb's journey through education in further detail, and you'll learn more about her book and her passion for helping and supporting educators and leaders who work with students, families, and others to be the best version of themselves. So I'd like to welcome Deborah Patterson to the podcast. So I'd like to officially welcome you to the Creating Connections podcast. It's my pleasure to interview you today. And I read through your bio, and I've done a bit of an intro already for you, just a brief one. So I didn't want to give too many secrets away too soon.
Yep.
So I'm really excited to get to know you and understand your journey, because I think even just as a leader of people, not just in schools, but women, I suppose, of your generation, my generation, I guess back in our day, or I guess you're a little bit older than me, but not too much, not by too much. We weren't necessarily encouraged so much to have a career and a family, and it wasn't necessarily on our radar, I guess, as young people to try to do it all. I know I had that burning desire in me to pursue a career, and I didn't really think about having a family till I was well in my late 20s, maybe, around 28, age of 28, because I was really keen to actually do something with myself and my skills, and I knew I had some talents that I wanted to explore. So I wanted to just ask you to start with a question about what is it that is the fire in your belly that has led you to become a fantastic educator, leader, a mother, a grandmother, and do it all? Because it is not easy. We know it's not easy. It's a very big challenge to take on as a woman, particularly, and especially probably in education, where it is, there are a lot of females, of course, but there are not a lot of female leaders.
Mm.
So I'd love to hear from you what you think the fire in your belly is and where it actually comes from.
That's a good question, Rachel. I've often thought about that as well. But right from, I suppose, being born into a family where Dad was in the Navy, Mum just stayed at home. But with Dad being in the Navy, we moved around Australia several times from city to city. And I sat down once and I actually realised that I've lived in 14 different places until I was 21. So that's almost moving every year, every second year. So you very quickly learn how to adapt to different environments. You have very little material possessions, and they mean little to you in the long term, but you build relationships and you learn how to go into different environments, suss the environment out, learn the skills, and above all, learn the pecking order where you belong. And sometimes I did belong, sometimes I didn't. And living like that, moving around, adapting, you had to be very flexible. So, but the bottom of the basis of a lot of my credit and success has been that I have good values. You know, we have the family values and the ability to actually get out of that poor sort of label that we were. And I realised we didn't have very much money. We didn't have very many material belongings. But I just wanted to get to do better and to just keep moving forward. So that was always the momentum in my mindset, was have fun, make friends, and be the best person that you possibly can be.
Yeah. And so it's really just going through that process of learning through life experiences that you start to understand, I guess, what your purpose is. And then that purpose is what drives you to
Yes.
to succeed. So can you share a little bit about how you ended up in education? Was it something that you always thought you would be a teacher, or did you start off doing other work before you became a teacher?
No, I didn't want to become a teacher. It was only Dad said to me, Deborah, what have you thought about teaching? And I said, Dad, I don't like little kids. And it was a real sort of admission. I actually wanted to go into politics and be the first female premier.
Really? There's still
Yep.
time.
Uh, no, it was actually my year 12 social studies teacher gave me 44 out of 100 for an essay. And I said, why did I get such a low mark? And he said, because I want to make you work harder. And well, that just changed my whole direction. So I then thought, no, I'm not going to go into, I wanted town planning as a funny thing. But I sort of always thought about those words that Dad said, go into teaching. And because I played netball and I was captain of Victoria at the age of 16, I thought, yep, that's my strength. I'll go into phys ed teaching and do that. But so I got a scholarship to go to Melbourne State College and do my phys ed major. But 10 years later, just to make sure that that social studies teacher wasn't correct, I went back to uni and I actually took me 7 years part-time with a baby, with two children, one child and a baby, and I completed that economics degree.
Isn't that amazing how
Yeah,
one teacher has has put the fire in your belly, actually?
yes, yes.
We can sometimes see those experiences as a negative. And just in that conversation, then I just realized you and I have a lot in common because I used to be a netballer as well. And I had a teacher who told me I was no good at maths when I was in grade 4. And I'm still not very good at maths, but it did put a fire in my belly, as it has with you, to prove them wrong
Oh,
and
yes.
and to really work hard to show, well, actually, I'm pretty smart and I think I can actually do really well. So
Mm,
it's interesting how that sort of negative comment or experience actually shapes you as a person. So as you moved into teaching, did you start to enjoy children? I hope you did.
yeah, yeah. I realised, well, my family just with 4 siblings and mum and dad not having any brothers and sisters close to us, we were a very insular family. But the moment I got into teaching, I knew it was my passion, it was my love. And having that sporting background and teaching grade 5 and 6 and being able to, do a drop punt or swim or run and beat the kids, you soon got them on side. So, and that passion in my speech when I retired, I started with the essence of the love of this job. And when I retired, I still had that same level of passion. And I'm continuing that as a mentor, advisor, coach, even now after retiring from teaching.
Yeah. I think I wanted to touch on that passion and how you actually kept that passion the whole way through your career, because we are seeing, unfortunately, a lot of teachers leaving the profession and really not coping with the challenges that are arising within education and with children and all the societal pressures that we're under now, and with families as well. What do you think is it that gives you, and I know sport does have a lot to do with it, I think it gives you a lot of grit and really helps you to overcome challenges, to think differently, to try and win?
Yes.
And what else is it that you think really gives you that extra push to know that you can get through those challenges? And
Mm,
especially for people who are listening or watching this interview and are thinking about going into leadership, but there's always that, I suppose, fear or barrier thinking or limited self belief that, what if this happens and what if that happens and how am I going to cope and what if these challenges really impact me as a person and my life. So what is it that you think got you through?
Mm. You know what? From our school life or professional life, we should find purpose and meaning. And I always look for my purpose and where I fitted in, and I got meaning and I got enjoyment. So I even on a bad day, I'd find something good about it or learning. And I know that sounds a little bit sort of a little bit too far fetched, but nothing really towards the end it sort of got to me. But in my early career, it was, well, that's what you do. You love what you do. You love your work. So if you find purpose and meaning, and then in your personal life, love and support by being a young mother and sort of getting married and going through those typical cycles of life, I had that really good balance. But sometimes I perhaps threw too much of myself in my work. I didn't notice that towards the end of my career because it does, the job consumes you. And when you go up the ladder to being a principal, and I was a principal of a school that had 1,100 kids and 110 staff for 14 years. And the pressures of the job were enormous as my years of experience went on. But I had a very loving husband. I had, two children. Don't quote me on the teenage years. They certainly impacted on me. But I also had a nice balance. I played netball. I entertained a lot. I just loved doing those things. But nowadays, the issues that I dealt with when I finished in 2020, the issues of the last 4 years they have impacted enormously on someone's mental well-being and even their passion. What once they probably loved, COVID really took a real hit on not only the teachers, the leaders, but also the students. So what I'm probably saying is I love what I did and I still do, but now the mindset of being a leader has changed somewhat. When I coach and lead and go out and talk to schools and facilitate conferences and keynote, you can't lead the way that I led 5 years ago. It's the mindset that a principal and a leader has to lead with today is totally different. It's not top-down, authoritarian, democratic, you must do this. It's co-designing, collaborating, working together in harmony, meeting what the department expects of us, but at the same time, as a principal, you understand your context very uniquely. And sometimes you have to give, and I'll give a little bit here, but I can't give here. And nowadays, I think that's what's making the difference between successful schools and non-successful schools.
Yeah. So do you think that the schools who are still adopting that old leadership style of top-down controlling, I guess micromanaging teachers and that sort of thing, they're not necessarily doing too well?
Definitely. I work as an advisor with the Victorian Principals Association, so I see it's different now. I see more the problems dealing with the issues of what not to do. And you've got to think of our schools as psychological bubbles or psychological organisations, and try and contain the psychological safety of all those that are within the bubble, the teachers, the parents, the students, looking after their psychological, their safety, their well-being, enabling them to have a voice. But nowadays, you only need one bullying accusation. You need to be one gaslighted particular person, a disgruntled neighbour to your school, or something written on social media. Then you open the door that you've got outside organisations that you're accountable to, the VIT, Conduct and Ethics, VCAT. So all of a sudden, that safe psychological bubble has got some holes in it, and you're having to deal with outside organisations, which takes your time off. You know, some of the issues that I dealt with took up 95% of my time. A fraudulent Facebook account where some of my children were being threatened on Facebook and impacting on, I've got grade 6 girls who are self-harming. I've got some grade 5 students not wanting to come to school, all because of these issues. So I spend 95% of my time on issues not even related to teaching and learning. And that's a pity that those holes in that psychological bubble are causing principals to take on and deal with issues outside, which go into legal ramifications.
The risk of being a school leader now is so high. Can you take me back to, we'll touch on that a little bit later, but can you take me back to when you were thinking about becoming a leader? And I suppose we want to encourage young teachers or, you know, experienced teachers to become leaders. Can you take me back to that time and just visualize how you were feeling at that time in terms of your aspirations to be a leader? And was there a specific person who encouraged you to become a leader, or was it something that you just decided that you were ready for as part of your career journey? Was there a specific mentor who guided you in that process? And also, I suppose, just you've touched on how leadership has changed, but how has it actually changed over time? So it's not something that's happened overnight. It's actually a gradual process, I guess, with the introduction of new technologies and the way people live and families and the types of issues that we have now with children outside of school.
All right, I remember that. I remember the exact time that I decided, right, I'm going to step up as a leader, because my boss brought my leader and myself into his office, and he asked a question: did the person that was in the office with me, did they say this? And he looked at me and I said yes, and she said no, but she was my leader, my team leader. And when she sat there and blatantly lied, I thought to myself, someone once said to me, if you think you can do a better job than your team leader, that's the time to step up. And I knew in that moment her values and they weren't aligned to what we're supposed to be doing. Like, tell the truth, be honest, be transparent. And they're the values that I have lived all my life. And as a leader, especially, you know, this is who you see. I'll tell you like it is. I'll be honest with you. I'll try and say it in a diplomatic way, but I don't beat around the bush. I don't fluff around. And so that was that particular moment. But it was a very male-dominated area of leaders. So I was lucky. I had my principal who really believed in me. Was lucky that I coached his granddaughter in netball and we won some grand finals. But you had to match it with the males. And so I got my bus licence. I could ride a ride on motor mower. I could fix the fuse that went. I could get on the roof. You know, what a pity I had to do a lot of those things, but I had to match it. I had to show that I could lead a school, that I could, the boilers go out. So lucky Dad was a boiler maker, and I could do those mechanical things, those carpentry things. But the real core of running a school is those students. How do you build teacher capacity to improve student learning? So I had to then go insular and really know my craft and the science of teaching and learning. And that's where you get the credibility of being an instructional leader. So if you were the old type bin ball bells type of leader, they don't make it nowadays. It's those instructional conversations about pedagogy, about formative, about construction of the curriculum, that leaders nowadays will be successful, understanding the P-12 developmental rubrics. And if you've got students in your school who are not at level, the ones below, well, what are you doing about it? Get them up, get them to their level. And what about the children who are 6, 12 or 18 months ahead? How do you maintain that momentum of growth? So a leader nowadays has to really look at their planning, moral purpose, how they're planning. What are the teaching models operating in the class? Is it the old chalk and talk? Because that went out years ago. It's about cooperative groups, children learning from each other. And that's where you see, it's a beautiful time for a principal when you see the growth in your staff. They go back to their classroom and implement the new ideas that the department's putting out. You see the students improving. Management is really good. Out of 1,000 students, I could count on one finger my most disruptive child, because I had a strong belief as the leader of that school that no child should interfere with the learning of another child. And we don't give up on any child in this school. That's our purpose. We have to find out how they tick, what trauma that's happening, and find that little bit of, I was lucky because I knew this particular child loved Chocky Bicky, Tim Tams, and hot chocolate. So that was my little wand that I would wave to him when he was chucking a wobbly or going on a stamping rampage. So it's the principle that it's a privilege and an honour to be in charge of that. Yes, times are tough, but look at the way you're leading and how you're leading, and maintain that love of what you do.
Yeah, and I think your experience with the other leader who wasn't being authentic and honest, that obviously has an impact on you as a person. And as a leader, the person you are and the morals that you have and the values, and really sticking to them, can be challenged by those who are quite the opposite. I guess it's got me thinking, what sort of person do you need to be a good leader? But also, what supports do you need around you? Because it really is, it can be lonely at the top, of course,
Oh,
even
yes.
though it's not hierarchical anymore. But the structure, I suppose, that you want to encourage is to have people around you that you can collaborate with. Who are those people? Are they other leaders, or do they come to you? Do you seek people from outside of education as your mentors and supports? Obviously, your family is really important, to have a supportive family. But who is it that you can actually rely on? Because obviously when you see behavior like that, it does make you question who you can trust, especially as a leader, and especially when you become successful or you have some success. And there are people who behave a certain way and don't really praise you for that success, or they're envious of it. So who do you surround yourself with, or who did you surround yourself with, who you could trust in your role?
You know, I still do like to keep my family providing me with a love and support. I don't need the intellectual stimulation from my family, because that was very adamant that, Mum, you're not a principal now, or, so I had to buffer myself before I got home and become the mother and the wife and the daughter and things. There are all those types of roles that women have. But from my professional life, I was fortunate I had a couple of really good role models to look up to, but we reach out. Every step of the ladder, you read, you go to forums. But I found the Victorian Principals Association an enormous group, just to be with like-minded people who talk about their issues. I mean, we could spill our guts and be honest and even when I chaired our local Whittlesea Network, Principals Network, that was the same format, that I liked us to be in a safe place. You've got to feel that you are safe, that you can talk about some things and get advice. And I use the old De Bono's 6 thinking hats. And when I'm making a decision, I either do it, dump it, diary, or delegate. And these are all the tips in my book. I've got all these tips, tools, and strategies that I've learned, and it's usually 3 or 4 things. But going to, at the same time, you like to talk about your issues. How did you deal with it? And everybody's got an opinion. But at the end of the day, you've got to take it back and contextualise it and apply it to your school. And there are a couple of times where I've actually stood outside. I've really believed in something. I really believed in the early years readiness program that I implemented for 10 years at my school. And that was creating a 2-year prep program, because I saw that the number of children coming into school were socially and emotionally not ready. And yet we put them in, we put these children into school, and they go up and up every year. Because I was a young child, I was a year and a half younger than everybody in my year level. And socially and emotionally, I got on well, but I struggled academically. And so what happened to me, I made sure that the school provided better resources for those, socially and emotionally immature children. Well, they weren't immature, they just weren't ready. But what I was saying, when you do go to your like-minded people and seek advice, at the same time, I also had a very strong defence mechanism. I wouldn't, you have to, it is lonely at the top, and if you don't have AP assistant principals and other people you can talk to, but you've always got to watch your back. You've got to, you'll say something or you'll do something wrong. So we're always hyper alert. And so that defence just goes up a little bit. And sometimes I wish I could have I did lower it, put the defence down a little bit, but then again, something happens in the school and you notice you've got to go out in front and lead. And that's the difference. Principals or leaders who are too friendly, too I don't even know the word.
Passive, maybe?
Yeah, you've got to realise that you're a leader for a certain reason. And there are times when you've got to lead, and you lead with your head, heart, and hand. And when you've got a problem solved, you default to the head. Sometimes if you're too much on the heart side, I had a principal ring me up 9:30 that I was mentoring. She said, "Deborah, I'm going to resign by 5 o'clock today." And I had to say, "Stop, you're thinking with your heart, get back into the technical, the problem solving. What do you have to do? Bang, 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 bang." And 5 o'clock, I got a text, "Deborah, you were right. I'm still in the system."
Yeah, well, you have to draw on so many different skills, don't you? And I can see a pattern throughout your life and through the story you've shared so far of where it actually does come from. That passion is from your heart, because you obviously had your heart broken when you were in school yourself, and you've been on a journey to repair that, I guess, by helping others to
Yes.
well in their education, and for you to keep going, to have that passion really does come from the heart. And I love the name of your book, Passion, Guts and Leadership. It's very strong title. Can you tell me a little bit about the book in terms of what it means to be an unconventional leader? What does that actually mean? And what do you hope to achieve by distributing this book and sharing it with other leaders?
And just getting back to what you said before, Rachel, I've never actually heard anybody say that about me in terms of listening to my story and then leading with the heart. Thank you for that. The book's called Passion, Guts and Leadership, and it was during COVID that I decided, well, not really. It was the 19th of March, 15th of March 2019, I had a stroke at school. And 5 years earlier, I've had breast cancer, then I had a stroke and I left and went into hospital and got told, gee, Deborah, that's the small one before the big one. And I thought, oh my God, I've just dodged 2 bullets. I don't know. And I didn't even know I was having the stroke. And that was what was so alarming to me, because, as I said before, our head is with the department from 6 a.m. in the morning till 10 p.m. at night. That's 16 hours. And then you go to bed and we've got 8 hours to sleep, but I wake at 3:03 and 5:38. So we don't get enough time to reset. And my head, everything was in my head space, and I wasn't listening to my body and I wasn't exercising enough. So when I had that stroke, I decided to take time off, take a term off, but then they found a 6 centimetre tumour on my thyroid. So I took the rest of the year off and decided, you know what, I've done 22 years as a principal, 46 in education. I've dodged 2 bullets. I've got a thyroid, a suspected hole in the heart. I think it's about time I focused on myself. And so I went laterally to my love and support from my family. And then I decided, right, it's time to share. I felt robbed a little bit because I still love what I do. So that's why I wrote the book, Passion, Guts and Leadership, because you have to have passion to do this. And you have to have guts. And my editor said, Deborah, take that word out and put courage. And I go, no, if you actually know my story, it's a lifetime full of guts, of pushing the barrow, of doing things, of speaking up for children or for what I considered was important. And leadership, obviously, because it's all about, but it's an A to Z in tips, 5 or 6 tips for every letter. And the unconventional came from, well, I'm not the norm. And I realised that when I was about 25, thinking, you know what, I can't fit into that mould of the quiet, the conservative, the educated. Although I did deliberately upgrade when I had a baby, I realised that I hadn't done that degree. So I not only went back and did that degree, but I also got a double degree, because I was brought up in an era, if you don't have BA and BEd at the end of your name, people don't listen. But yet the essence and the passion of what I had in early teaching, I've had right through. But the moment I had BA and BEd at the end of my name, oh, let's get Deborah Patterson to speak. Oh, Deborah Patterson. They don't know that I wasn't brought up in a privileged life, that I travelled. My parents were alcoholics. We had a very dysfunctional family. We lived in the high-rise flats in Fitzroy. But the moment you've got BA and BEd at the end of your name, all of a sudden they give you credibility. And I didn't like that falseness about leadership and about who you are and being the authentic leader. So I'm proud I'm unconventional. I'm loud, I'm extrovert, but gee, I tell you what, I don't put up with any nonsense. I get kids where they are. I build teacher capacity, and I'm a bloody good leader.
I love that. Oh my gosh, I've learned so much about you. It's amazing, and how strong you are, because it takes so much strength to get through so many different things. And I think that, like, I know I'm really excited to share your story, because I believe that women, particularly as they get older, have so many experiences that they need to share, and really talk about those stories and how you actually got through those times. Because even as a kid, you've obviously had a challenging childhood, and to try and overcome a challenging childhood is a life journey. It doesn't happen overnight, and it's a very unique personal experience that you've gone through. And you've obviously channeled that passion into just learning about learning and learning how to help other kids because gosh, we have so much in common because I too had a really traumatic childhood and I am so passionate about seeing kids thrive
Mm,
that that's where the fire comes from. It's like, I don't want to see kids go through what I went through. I don't want to see adults go through what I've been through either. But to share that story is so important. And I think that the format of the book sounds really good too, because it's just short tips for people to take on board. And but ultimately it is a personal journey, and that authenticity comes from those experiences. And yet I suppose the old way of leadership was, no, you need to be stoic and not show
mm.
yourself, not be vulnerable. But we know that that vulnerability really breeds good leadership as well. So can you talk a little bit about how you have shown that vulnerability, even though we need to balance our masculine and feminine all the time because we're in a very male dominated part of education, but you also can show your vulnerability as the feminine side where it's okay to show that, especially when working with kids.
Mm. Yeah, I had a coaching session yesterday, and I asked one of the teachers, what are you doing during the vacation break?" And she said, "Oh, I'm seeing my mother." And I just burst into tears. And I thought, oh, gee, this is not like me. I don't usually cry, but and I said that I haven't seen my daughter for 6 years because she's in Germany. And I can remember, but it was an emotion that I haven't felt for a while. And I wasn't ever a crier. And when I needed to show my vulnerability side, it's when you're being honest and when you're trying to, you could be talking to a single mum or a dad who's just um, his wife just left with the two kids, or a traumatized student. There were all times. As a leader, it's important to show your empathy, and I know that's a word. We talk about the listening skills of empathy, reflective and activation, but you really have to. I could identify with a lot of the parents, even parents I taught with when I was principal at Templestowe Valley, or the families over at Mill Park Heights. There was all, don't worry, I've probably been there myself, and I understand. And when I had some teachers that would come to me and complain that some kids didn't have lunch or whatever, and I go, it's probably because they've got no money. And that's our job. We'll get them something to eat. And a parent that, had about 5 children, a single mum, and the husband was unfortunately in prison, I would say, listen, I'll come and pick the kids up. Don't worry about their uniform or their lunch. Just get them to school. So it's having that, being vulnerable. I could many times, many instances, it's relating to people and saying to them, very few times I would actually admit to some. I've got to be careful with some parents because I didn't ever want it to come back with me. Also, teachers that, yes, I lived in Fitzroy, in Brunswick Street, Fitzroy, in the high-rise flats. I know what it's like to be amongst gangs. That happened to me. I was walking home from college. Half a dozen teenagers, boys moved over to my side. I changed the street. They also moved over to that side, and I knew I was gone. But with the old, it's who you know in Fitzroy in those days. And when I mentioned what family I was from, they scattered, and so that was able to diffuse.
Survival of the fittest.
Yep. And parents, when they want, a father came in and he said, "You don't know what I want to do to your face." And I said, "Oh, please let me put my lippy on." Or another one that said, "Do you know I've got 14, I've just got out of prison and I've had 14 years for murder." And I said, "Well, I had better be nice to you. Now, come on, let's refocus." And I've already worked as a mentor in Dame Phyllis Frost, so I know that what it's like to be in prison. And when I reminded him that I was a mentor next door from Port Phillip Prison and the Dame Phyllis Frost, I was almost like his best friend. So my vulnerability I could relate to. I didn't have to divulge my whole life, but showing that empathy and understanding goes a long way.
Yeah, so just being able to put yourself in their shoes. And do you think that that is one trait, and perhaps this is in your book as well, in really being able to do that with, especially with families, and working with families in partnership rather than seeing them as, you know, the guy who's been in prison or
Mm,
the guy who's, you know, lost his job, and, you know, the perceptions that we have of each other is really critical, isn't it, to understanding and having that understanding and to be able to have those conversations to
mm.
alleviate any of the barriers that they have up.
Yes. Well, yeah, definitely my life experiences, but it's how you speak to people. I had a dad come in and say, you know, I've my family have left me, my wife and two kids, and I'm now sober. And I said, how long have you been sober? He said, 1 day. I said, you know what? A man is defined by the father he is. And you come back to me in a month and tell me how long you've been sober. And do you know, he came back to me, and I think it was about 3 years he was sober when I left, and he thanked me. He said, no one else spoke to me like that. And so it's having that ability to, sometimes I did cross the line a little bit and speak sort of not as a principal, but as a mother, as a grandmother, and having that ability, it's how you do it. And probably the years that I volunteered, when you talk about where did I get inspiration, I volunteered with the YMCA. I was the local president of Whittlesea for 6 years, and then I went on to the national board. But it was the year that I led the National Redress Committee for victims of sexual abuse in our, in our system. It was a real eye opener, and it comes back to, like what you said, being leaders and being privileged. Our kids deserve the best life that they can possibly be, have, and we owe it to them as educators, as principals, as leaders, but as mothers and fathers and family to do what's best for that. And I'll never give up. That's part of my goal. The other goal is to stay above the ground, but the other goal is, as long as I can promote the tooltips of being a better leader and creating that environment that is the best environment for our children, then we're creating a better future for all. And that's the YMCA's theme, creating a better future for the communities that we live within. So that's also impacted on me. My VACRO work as a volunteer mentor with prison, in the prison system, and my leadership as a principal. That's why I do what I do.
Serving the community. Yeah, well, I'm going to share a story with you now about, and maybe you can share a story as well in your experience. And I guess you've drawn on your own life experience and the volunteering work you've done, to be able to relate to people. But obviously, not every leader will have the same life as you and experiences. And I guess my question is, how important is it to get to know your community so that you understand the children more? And the story I want to share with you is a school that I worked in a few years ago. We did a lot of work with family school partnerships. And
Yeah.
one of the things that the school principal did was took a minibus around the community and showed the teachers where all the children lived. And it happened to be in a fairly new estate over in the West. And, you know, all the houses are nice and new, and they look nice from the outside. But he said to the team of teachers that Appearances don't tell the whole story, because a lot of these families are sacrificing a lot to be able to afford to buy a house, but a lot of them don't have furniture. And we know that some of our children don't come to school with breakfast, having had breakfast. So don't be fooled by appearances, but this is the reality of our community, and we need to be mindful of that, and we need to understand our families. So what are some stories that you can share of how you got to know families and how you engage them in the community?
And I love that about that principle that you just mentioned, because growing up in a family that had to rely on secondhand uniforms and things like that. But we had a refugee family that came over here from Iraq. And the father's sitting there, and if he hadn't have fled that house with his family, 10 minutes later, a group of the surgeons came in and shot everybody. Now, when I heard that from the caseworker, I just shook that man's hand. What is it that you had to flee? So I said, don't worry about uniforms, books, anything, we'll do everything. And when you talk about furniture, we put an ad in the paper, and the Mill Park Heights community were fabulous. We've got a family, anybody got any furniture, please let us know. So they would tell us. And George, our groundsman with his trailer, would go around, pick it up and go and give it to them. The same with a single Indian mum came and she didn't have anything. Yet we all pitched in, and that's the community and that's the school that you want. And so doing that as a whole school showed this is what we do at Mill Park Heights. These are the values. But with the teachers, I used to say, for the month of February, I don't want you to have any meetings, because when you sit down with me in the first week in March, I used to have 2 weeks of March where they would come and sit down with me, teachers and their leader and my assistant principals, and I would say, tell me 5 things about, and I'd just pick a name. Tell me 5 things about Rachel. I would want them to be able to tell me what literacy level, what numeracy. I'm sorry I had to pick those things. But any brothers or sisters? Does she play anything on the weekend? What's her favourite colour? Because those children are yours for that whole year. Know every single thing about them and where they are and where you've got to take them. And that was important. It's the essence. Unfortunately, we have to deal with the formative assessment all the time, and not the other forms of assessment, which are just as important. It's how, as much as we like 12 months plus growth every year, we also, you might have a child in your class that only grew 6 months because they may have come from a traumatized family, or they've been moving around. That value that you added to them in 6 months was probably the most growth they've had for ages. So if you want to be an average Miss Beige or Mr. Beige teacher, this is not the right school. I want colourful, out there, get to know kids, teachers who are genuine, who can genuinely add value to those children's lives.
And I guess that's one of the biggest challenges of a leader too, is to choose the right people to teach in your school so that you can lead them in a way that you like to achieve your vision. So do you have any tips in your book about how to hire the right teachers and quality teachers and how to retain them? Because I suppose that's one of the biggest challenges at the moment. How do you retain teachers, especially with the workload and the stresses that they're facing now?
You know what? When you have a panel, each one of those panel members looks for something different. It's funny, after being someone who knocked qualifications, I would always look for qualifications. If I got an application, I'd go, where did they go to school? Okay. Did they have a part-time job? That was important. I didn't like, this is probably, that Pearl syndrome type person who's had a privileged life. And I feel awful saying that, but I'd like to see that graduate teachers had a part-time job that worked extra hours, because that's what I had to do when I went through Teachers College. I was washing dishes at the Prince Alfred Hotel in Port Melbourne. I was at Coles as well. I was babysitting. I did bar work, and I umpired netball at Royal Park to earn extra money, because I
Probably
think,
applied me.
yeah, that's it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So it's, where did you go to school? Did you have a part-time job? What other things? And Val, my assistant principal, she looked for qualities I didn't even look for. I'd say, I like this person, and then she'd say, no, this person's got this, this, and this. And you know what? I'd go with her choice. Never once was I sorry I didn't go for what she said. So, because that's important to have a panel of that look at every different aspect. I mean, you have your matrix, you've got to go tick, tick, and they're referees. But I sit there and think, can they fit into my school? Have they got the right values? Do I think that they're going to challenge people? Will they get on with my parents? Will they make an effort with the teachers? And they're the hidden, the non-agenda items that principals and leaders look for when you select staff.
Yeah, and I guess all of those other experiences they have outside of education are so critical too to becoming a good teacher, because life experience, as you've demonstrated, is so important to make you as a person.
Yes.
And having a part-time job is all about interacting with people. And yeah, if you don't have that experience, then how can you interact with parents for a start, and
Yes.
other teachers and students? So it's such a well-rounded role, isn't it, as a teacher and as a school leader, that you have to have so many different qualities, and which is why teachers really do need to be seen as more valued, I think, because their skill set needs to be very broad, and the resilience they need, especially when they are hearing stories about children and their backgrounds and the challenges that their families are having, and all of those different things that they're managing every day. So as a school leader, what sort of I guess support do you provide for your teachers to be able to manage all of the load that they have, not just on their workload, but also personally? Because it's no longer really, I suppose, it's very challenging not to take things home at night, especially when you're working with kids and you're hearing different stories about them, and you need to be able to work around those stories. How do they get support? And I know you're doing some coaching now. Are there supports for teachers to be able to manage those challenges?
Mm. Every educator, I'm 200. Look, I can't even how much percentage is important. Should have a coach, a mentor, or a critical friend. You've got to have that nowadays. I wish I had have had it when I was an experienced pring. And now I'm working for the Academy, Victorian Academy of Teaching and Learning. I've got 12 principals at the moment, 7 secondaries and 5 primary principals. And I have 2 schools I coach, and I have my own mentor principals that I only meet once a month, because it's important to be able to, a coach actually asks questions, empowers younger teachers or empowers those middle leaders. A mentor tells them, based on my knowledge, skills, and what I know, no, don't do that. You'll be on the front page of the Herald Sun. No, I would no more do that than fly. So you sort of, they needed that. And even a principal yesterday, she came in, she said, quickly, can I have 5 minutes? And she said, the child's done ding, ding, ding. I want to suspend. And I said, well, yes, the child warrants a suspension, But and then she said, oh, she's from a single mum. I said, well, you can't suspend until you bring that mum in, and that mum may be a full-time, she may be working. So we've got to be careful to take the whole high moral ground. We've got to understand the families that we work with. If you want to get her on side, if she agrees that, okay, I'll stay home, but more than likely you'll have to do an internal suspension. And she goes, oh yeah, that's that. So sort of that, being able to bounce ideas off is really good. At the same time, we should look within our school day to try and get everything that's expected of a teacher. The planning should be done in school. Your meetings, you have to, all right, there's 2 definite meetings per week, but don't call them in excessive time. And most leaders are meeting the new VSBA, not VSBA, the new agreement, EBA regulations. And that's, don't send an email after 5 p.m. on a Friday night expecting them to answer. So you have to look at what are the issues that's impacting. Listen to the teachers. Let them voice. I went out into the eastern, the regional area and ran a curriculum day. All right, what's working here at the school? What's not working? Okay, what are the areas that we need to tweak? What do we need to get rid of? And don't make it so hard. Try and make it enjoyable where they do want to go. They're not overwhelmed. And, put your fun things in. But at the same time, support them. Listen. You're not coping in your class because of so-and-so. Okay, come down, work alongside and showing, because teacher wellbeing and leadership wellbeing, mental and physical, is so important. So it's, look at your school. I went down to down the Wonthaggi way, and I said to the principal, it's too clogged up. It's cluttered. Declutter. Get rid of. Let the air flow. Look, you've got dead plants all over the place. Cut them. Tidy the school up. Declutter. So these are all the things that make up a good school. Fix the outside first, work inside, and co-design and collaborate with your teachers.
Yeah, and create an environment that's conducive to good education and good relationships.
Yeah. And look, you put it in that's the word, relationship. It's all about that, building solid, trustworthy relationships with people. And that way you get, in my book, it's the 5 Bs. Staff, either they'll block you, they'll buy in, or I used to say, bow out. This is not your school. Unfortunately, you can't. Well, you can, but you want the staff to stay. You only want them to leave if it's for promotion or something like that. But I was very lucky with 110. You want them to be a family. You want them to have their children when they did long service leave. But let's all work together.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you are absolutely still creating change in education, which is fantastic, and really utilizing your experience to share with others. And it's so needed, I think, now. And I'm wondering, just one final big question for you is, in terms of the future of education, how do you see that it needs to change? And we've just touched on quite a few different areas in the interview, but how else do you think education needs to change for our children to be thriving? Because clearly they're not thriving. Not everyone is struggling, of course, but there are a lot of children who are, both at home and at school. And I guess it's quite sad to see that. It saddens me to see that children are struggling, and especially with a lot of high anxiety and really struggling at school, and trying to do something about that. Obviously, your role in mentoring and coaching leaders is so critical, because it starts with leadership. Everything starts with leadership, and we really need good leaders, which is why I started this podcast to really encourage good leadership in education. So what would you say are some of the things that you see from your broader perspective of your career and all the people you've worked with and all the experiences that you've had that needs to change?
Firstly, and I don't know why there's not more upheaval, but it's the inequity with funding in government schools. It's a joke. It's when you look at what a child gets in Prep 1 and right up to grade 6 as compared to our independent and our Catholic system, it's just it's appalling. But it takes a gutsy state, federal government to actually say, and we hear it. I've been 50 years in education, and I've heard, all the leaders come by and they say, yes, we know that it's not equitable, but this is what you get. Appreciate what you're being given. We're giving equity funding. We're doing this, but it's not the discrepancy and the difference is we can see it. Why aren't government children getting the same funding that an independent or a Catholic school? The school down the road could have, a pool, a gymnasium or whatever, but the local government school has got cracks in their building and things like that. Admittedly, parent choice, they can go wherever they want, but, that fair funding of government schools, that's the essence of being a government principal. It's the, it comes back to building better relationships. And you talked about, it's unfortunate that you've seen high anxiety and high depression and trauma with students. But you know what? When you actually understand and you upskill your knowledge about what a traumatized child, what anxiety, what leads to depression, and you change the way you teach, you change the content, because I believe if you've got the right moral purpose, you know the needs of your students, you adapt the program planning according to that. And there is the schools that have school-wide positive behaviour and addressing the student misbehaviour, and I'm seeing that's increased enormously. You've got kids swearing at teachers, spitting at teachers, harassing. I wouldn't tolerate that. And so you need to tighten up. And you've got some principals that have gone into some really difficult schools and transformed them. And those schools are doing beautifully at the moment. School-wide positive behaviour, tighten it with explicit teaching. They're the schools that are doing really well. You get Matt Pittman, who's just written the connection curriculum for the global village, where you co-design the curriculum with the students. You can do that. It takes a very gutsy and informed school to take that on. But to stay tight, explicit teaching with your school-wide positive behaviours, you look at your teaching models in the classroom, you upskill your staff, then you get the students who feel calmer, and achieving what they should be. That you're building teacher capacity and getting back to my YMCA better future for all. It can be done, but it's got to be tight. It's got to be rigorous. It's got to go deep. And you've got to see it, feel it, and hear it in every classroom and aspect of your school. And what's good, I'm one of two principals that have been chosen from the department, bringing our Better School Parent Relationship Program rollout. So they're trying to do something to improve relations and issues in the school. And that will be rolled out next year. And I'm really excited about that, because it comes back to that safe psychological bubble that you have within schools and creating those cultures, which it's beautiful to be part of a really successful school. And every school starts with equity funding.
And I guess the equity funding will allow school principals and leaders to be able to upskill their staff, and the funding can go towards really providing the opportunities that all children deserve to have. So I think, yeah, there's a few different changes that can happen, and it won't happen overnight, I'm sure, because there's so many factors involved, isn't there? And as a leader, you have to be really patient and flexible in your approach. But there are always ways to particularly build relationships that don't cost money. And
Yes.
when it comes down to it, the relationship between teachers and students is critical, and can make or break, as you shared in your story and my own story of that teacher who perhaps did impact your world in a lot of ways, and mine too, in terms of the way that teachers relate to students should be more encouraging rather than, pulling them
Mm.
back, but also setting boundaries, like you mentioned as well, and giving children an understanding of right from wrong, and being able to behave a certain way towards other people particularly. And that obviously all comes back to relationships and trust. So it's been an absolute pleasure to have this conversation with you today. I've learned so much, and I'm sure whoever is listening and watching is going to also learn a lot from you, and continue to learn through your book, and possibly as a coach and mentor. So I'll put the details of the book below this video, but is there anything else you'd like to share for a start, but also where can they purchase the book and your services?
No, I just really appreciate, Rachel, that I felt quite honoured that you actually asked me to be part of this, and because I think you're right at the beginning, that sharing some women's stories that haven't had, and same as some men haven't had it easy, but you know what, women, it takes a very strong woman, and if we can learn anything, or if anybody can pick up a tip tool from what I've said today, go right ahead. The book's available, Passion, Guts and Leadership, an A to Z for the Unconventional Leader, is available from Amber Press at $39.95. And Alicia Cohen there, the publisher, she's great with organising the book to get out to everybody. It's an easy read, it's tips, and take it away, read it, and thank you.
You're most welcome. I found this interview extremely inspiring, and to hear your story has been, yeah, just amazing. So hopefully everyone enjoys listening as much as I've enjoyed talking to you today. And yeah, I'm sure I'll see you around. I'll probably see
Yes,
you at Matt's book launch, because
yes,
he's launching next week, and I'm so excited about his book as well. And
yes,
I've also interviewed him, so you'll be able to listen to that interview as well. So lots of
beautiful.
amazing people that I'm discovering, and I'm sure we'll cross paths along the way where we're all trying to make a difference in education. So thanks again for your time today.
Thank you, Rachel.
Well, what another inspiring interview in our Leadership in Education series of our Creating Connections podcast. If you enjoyed this interview and would like to learn more from other leaders in education, please click on the subscribe button to receive further podcasts on your feed. If you'd like to be a guest on our podcast, click on the link below to book a meeting with me to learn more about you and your leadership in education. Or if you're listening to this podcast, send an email to rachel@practicallylearning.com.au to express your interest in being on the podcast. If you are a school leader or teacher with aspirations for leadership, but you're challenged with self-doubt, overwhelm, and whether you have what it takes to take that next step, our Connect with Your Mind Mastery Coaching Program can support you to work on your own self-mastery to become the leader you aspire to be. For further information about our coaching and professional learning programs, please visit our website at practicallylearning.com.au or click on one of the links below and visit our podcast for our future series of interviews to support you as the adults who are guiding children on their learning journey. I do hope you enjoy the rest of our episodes on our Creating Connections podcast, and I hope to meet you soon.